Okay, most of you are seated. Now you have to stop talking. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Neil Mickenberg. I'm the chair of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. So the first thing I want to do is to have you all open your programs to the inside flap, and you will see our list of sponsors for today, all of whom are key partners in the housing and conservation movement. So let's give our sponsors a big round of applause. One of the both great and scary things about the housing and conservation movement in Vermont is that we have a lot of people, such as myself, who have been around for a really long time. And so what we've done is to ask our partner organizations to identify emerging leaders. And at this time, we've got 20 emerging leaders, just in the nick of time. And I wonder if those emerging leaders could stand. Anybody? An emerging leader here? All right. Give them a big round of applause. Let me just say that we are really glad that you are here. Yesterday I received a wonderful email from Dave Marvin, one of our board members, and in it he said we learn from each other and broaden our views, and that is exactly what we are going to do today. We're going to learn from each other and broaden our views. Our collective work is the preservation of essential resources, affordable housing, land, and to preserve resources effectively, we have to be able to anticipate and respond to change. And so that's what we're going to do today. Fortunately, we have a room full of great teachers, and that's all of you. So let's get some learning under our belts. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Gus Seelig. Thanks for joining us today. It's my privilege to work as the executive director for the board. A few words of thanks as we begin the day, and because it's my job to show up at the legislature to ask them to support your work, I want to particularly recognize Representative Tom Stevens, Representative Maida Townsend, Senator Chris Bray, and I don't know if Senator Ballant is here today, but would you give it up for all of them? They've been great supporters for our work. And for those of you who are focused on the next session, the annual meeting of the Housing and Conservation Coalition is going to take place over the lunch hour, which I'm sure is going to start late. I think that's going to be upstairs, but that's important work to do. Let me first say thanks to our board chair, Neil, who is just a tremendous chair, but there are a couple of other past chairs I've already seen here. John Ewing's here, Beth Humstone's here, and all of our board members, past and present, our staff, and a particular shout out to the people who worked on this conference so hard. Jenny Hislop, Pam Boyd, Karen Freeman, Diane McKay, Kathleen Collins, and Lori Graves went beyond the call of duty to get the day together. So thank you guys very much. There's a great day ahead. Usually what people really love are the field trips, so I hope you've signed up. I think they're all but one filled, so if you haven't, there's maybe room on one of them. There are some terrific workshops through the day. We're going to have a terrific plenary, and I'll introduce the keynote speaker in just a moment. But over recent weeks, we've been out of state to Woodstock, Burlington, Waterbury, Brattleboro, Heinsberg, opening great affordable housing. We're breaking ground on it. The Vermont Land Trust just opened an exhibit at the Shelburne Museum. I think it's called Eyes on the Land. Do I have that right, Gil? Okay, and you should all get over and see it. 13 different artists with a view of conserved land in Vermont. There is just tremendous work that's been done. We'll also end the day with a reception and some awards. And last year we were able to surprise people, so I hope that you'll all be able to join us for those awards. When we began this work, we didn't use words like smart growth, and we weren't thinking a lot about water quality, flood resilience, or health care. A few, but not many of us were thinking about climate change. And what I think we learn over and over again is we don't solve these problems in isolation. We don't solve the problems of opiate abuse or of unemployment or of hunger in isolation. These issues are all related, and so today is about a conversation between all of us about how our work fits together and how we can add benefits to each other's work. The results that you've all achieved is pretty incredible. And in Montpelier today, the buzzword is results-based accountability. So I'm not going to show you 20 slides of the results, but I'm going to share 6 as a kind of foundation as the base that we're going to build upon for the next decade. And this is what we begin with that you've accomplished. And let me just say, everybody ought to be proud. $1 billion in any place is a lot of money. In the little state of Vermont, to have leveraged over $1 billion, which is what all of you have done and matched and rematched and matched again, the amounts that we get from the legislature is just incredible. So give it up for yourselves for a moment. When this farm was conserved in 1994, we didn't know when it might change hands. But today it's gone to the next generation in the family. That round barn is the last working round barn in the state of Vermont. It's gone organic, and with the encouragement of a group called the Sweetwater Trust, it's probably the first easement that the board was involved with that really focused on wetlands and water quality. And really is a template for the work we discussed with the legislature during the last session. So perpetuity is a long time. We're not. The benefits keep accruing every year, and I think that's the quick point I want to make. This little house in Brookline got a $12,000 investment. It's the quintessential Vermont Cape. It's been home to 3 different families, so that's $4,000 per family for home ownership. Less than $600 a year to provide affordable housing, and it just keeps rolling forward. If you've got nothing to do this coming weekend, go to Green River Reservoir. The color is going to be incredible. I hope the weather's good, and it has got to be among the best places in the world to take your canoe or kayak, and it's one of 18 state parks that we've either contributed or added to over time, and it just keeps being a driver for tourism, for recreation, for all of our own health. It's just a wonderful place to be. So a little over 25 years ago, we made a $3 million investment, a big number, in Northgate Apartments, $22 million deal. That means that for 336 homes in the ensuing 25 years, we've spent less than $400 to preserve affordability, to put in place 180 Section 8 certificates to give people a high quality of life. I think that's a great deal for the taxpayers when you talk about results-based accountability. And this was, I think, April 2014, not 15, but those of some of you will be on a field trip here to Shelburne Village. It's right in the heart of the village. The adjoining property just became a co-op last week. And there are 82 homes here, 4 by Habitat for Humanity. The building in the middle there is Cathedral Square with SASH services, and then a bunch of other rental housing that the Champlain Housing Trust put together. But what you don't see, and we'll get away from the slides at this point, is that there's 15 acres of open space. There'll be a path along the river, a great project for the community that people will enjoy for quite a long time to come. So whether you have been in this effort for 25 or more years, like I see Frank Kochman here, and I see some other people who are as gray as I am or have lost more hair than I have, or you're like Erin Riley, who joined our AmeriCorps staff 2 months ago, I'm confident that whatever the challenges of the next decade, that this group, the organizations you all work for and support and represent, are more than up to the task. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and introduce our keynote speaker. Nancy Stangle is the co-founder and Emerita Director of the Athens Land Trust, Athens, Georgia. Her organization was founded in 1994. It conserves land, provides permanently affordable housing, promotes community agriculture. One of the only land trusts in the U.S. that includes all 3 of these programs. It's provided home ownership and rental housing for over 400 low-income folks. It's protected 13,000 acres of forest, farmland, and historic sites, wetlands and river corridors in 26 counties throughout Georgia, and has a network of 35 community school gardens and promotes entrepreneurship as well. I had a chance to have dinner with Nancy last night and hear a little bit of her story, and it's an important one. And let me just say one other promo for late in the day in terms of understanding our story and our roots. Later this afternoon, there's a great film that you all ought to check out that John Davis is going to present called Arc of Justice, also from work that was done a long time ago in Georgia. But with that, let me ask you to welcome to Vermont our friend from Athens, Georgia, Nancy Stangle.
I have a few photos to give you a little idea. Let's see if I can find it. I want to start a slideshow if I can. I'm having trouble finding it. The slideshow button. Is it right here? Well, it is a real treat to be here. The Vermont Housing and Conservation Board has been an inspiration to me for more than 20 years, so it is truly an honor to be here. It's also been a great pleasure to be in Vermont for the last few days. I really enjoyed the farmers market that was downtown here, the Eyes of the Land exhibit, the friendly, helpful people when I got lost, the beautiful farms, solar panels everywhere, no billboards anywhere, and the gorgeous landscapes. And while there are many differences that I've seen between Georgia and Vermont, we're all here today because we deal with land and care about land. Whether it's growing food, or protecting rivers and forests, or building houses. And we are all well aware that land sustains us. Our shelter, our food, our water and air, our jobs, everything we need to survive are all dependent on land. Because of its importance, land also represents power and wealth. It's been used to keep people oppressed and to help others gain more wealth. I come from a state where African Americans lost their lives when they stood up for the chance to own land or to have the same rights that white people took for granted. You'll hear the heartbreaking and inspiring story of Charles and Shirley Sherrod this afternoon when you see the film. In my opinion, this desire for power and the accompanying disregard for the welfare of the disenfranchised have led to what Europeans consider to be the most pressing issues we face today. Number 2, climate change, and number 1, poverty, hunger, and the lack of drinking water. To me, these are 4 huge problems that are interrelated and exacerbate each other. For example, one of the effects of climate change is drought. And drought, of course, decreases drinking water, but also makes land unable to produce food and then furthers poverty. All of these problems have resulted from how we have lived and the way we have used the earth, its soil, vegetation, minerals, rock, water, air, and habitat in an inequitable and short-sighted way. If we're going to address these major issues, we must ensure that land is used for the common good. The Native Americans believed that land could not be owned by individuals, Rather, it belonged to everyone. While that might be more than we can hope for, we can at least move toward that mindset. Out of the oppression that Charles and Shirley and other Black Southerners endured came new communities, a model of land use that has transformed many lives across the U.S. When landowners willingly protect the conservation values of their land by forgoing development, this benefits everyone. Land must be used for empowerment and sustenance, rather than oppression and greed. This includes meeting everyone's needs for food, shelter, and clean air and water in a way that supports future life on the planet, rather than destroys it. I began learning this in 1993 when I was a naive young mother wanting to live lightly on the land in a community of like-minded people. I was a former social worker, school teacher, and international student advisor. My husband and I were purchasing 18 acres of land along the Middle Oconee River, just 5 miles from Athens. A historic farm of 132 acres that was adjacent to us came for sale, and a group of us joined together to buy it. We had this piece of land where we wanted to build our neighborhood. It was like a blank slate. We looked at the acres that needed to be protected and the places where the housing could be. Our goal was to maintain the rural character and conserve as much of the land as possible, but we also wanted to have housing that was affordable. As we were building our neighborhood, we constantly challenged the county with our desires to do it more ecologically, to the point that at one meeting they called us the undevelopers. We were very proud of that. This property was a working farm shortly before we purchased it. There was a dilapidated farmhouse, a barn, and family cemetery. We wanted to protect a portion of our open space, and we contacted our local land trust. They said they would accept a conservation easement on the common areas that included the streams, woods, and steep slopes, but not the old farmland. We were at a loss because we wanted to protect it all, but we did not want to start another land trust. Around this time, I learned about community land trusts by chance, when my car broke down in a transitional neighborhood in Atlanta after I had taken my daughters to the zoo. Having my car break down was not a usual occurrence. This was before I had a cell phone, and a woman who allowed me to use her phone told me that she never would have been able to own a home in Atlanta without an organization she called CRAFT. This made a big impression on me. I ended up in the office of CRAFT to use the phone, and the director happened to know the friends I was staying with. She offered to take us to her home, and when we had all piled into her car, I asked what she did. She said CRAFT was a land trust. When I told her I knew about the kind of land trust that protected land, she said, "No, we're a community land trust." After hearing this, it struck me that maybe we did need to start a new land trust, one that would combine the legal tools and address both land conservation and affordable housing. This made perfect sense to me and my co-founder, Skipper Steitmoss, since both are important and they impact each other. I realized that if we were having these land use decisions on a tract of 132 acres, that surely the larger community was having them also. And indeed they were. The Athens community of 120,000 people is ranked 5th in size in Georgia, but it's the smallest county in area in a state that has 159 counties. We're so small that we have a consolidated city-county government. The largest employer in town is the University of Georgia, which now has over 35,000 students. Athens is 70 miles from downtown Atlanta, which was expanding rapidly in our direction in the 1990s. We had a lot of concerns about this. Would we be swallowed up by Metro Atlanta and just become part of the sprawl? In the mid-90s, the Athens community was wrestling with these questions because we were seeing the negative effects on air and water quality of sprawl-type development. Housing was becoming more unaffordable due to the growth of the university. 1 in 4 children lived in poverty, and less than half of our residents owned a home. The historic African-American neighborhoods close to campus were becoming gentrified, and the long-term residents were being displaced. We had no tree ordinance because the developers always exerted their political clout to stop it. In the late 90s, our community was updating its comprehensive land use plan, and the newly formed Athens Land Trust, or ALT as we call it, became active in educating people about sustainable land use, smart growth strategies, and more long-term vision. The environmental groups wanted to establish a green belt around the county to protect what little farmland we had left. The development community said that a green belt would limit affordable housing. We were able to say, as an affordable housing provider, that the Greenbelt was not the place for affordable housing. Rather, it needed to be close to services and public transportation. A coalition of groups that all was a major part of sponsored an annual event each year called the Tour de Sprawl, where people biked or rode a bus out to see the most outstanding examples of sprawl-type development. The terms smart growth and sustainable development became buzzwords in our community, as they did everywhere, but changing the mindset of Georgians and addressing embedded racism made implementing these ideas a difficult task. Because ALT, like you, sees land as a community resource to be used for the benefit of all, especially those who have not or do not have access to it. As we know, this is what creates a healthy and equitable community. However, this is a radical concept in Georgia. ALT works hard to educate our community that sustainable development includes environmental, social, and economic aspects. Just and equitable land use was and is as important as protecting natural resources. Our programs have evolved over the years as we have recognized that all of the needs of our community are interconnected and must be addressed as a whole. Using land for empowerment and sustenance has been our goal. And I'd like to share with you a few of the ways we have done that, and some of these photos are from these programs. Our land conservation continues to work with landowners, local governments, and farmers. We now work all over the state and have protected land in 9 of our 14 watersheds. Through purchased and donated easements, we protect diverse tracts of forest, river corridors, historic places, as you've heard, and also habitat for several endangered species. These protected lands provide immeasurable ecosystem services, as well as the sustenance that can only be found by spending time in nature. Our other major focus from the beginning has been permanently affordable home ownership through the Community Land Trust model. When you see the film later today, you'll see the great need. What happened there took place only 2 generations ago, and there's still great inequity in land use in Georgia. Since lifelong renters generally pay more than 3 times what homeowners do in their lifetimes for their housing, the inequity is perpetuated, with the people who have the least money paying the most for their housing. Homeowners have an asset, a stable place to raise their children and plant what they want, and something to pass on to their heirs. Owning a home is empowering and helps break the cycle of generational poverty. Our homes sell for less than $95,000 in order to be affordable to people in Athens making less than 80% of area median income, which is $40,000 for a family of 3. Most of our housing work is in 2 historic African-American neighborhoods where the poverty rate is over 50% and as high as 90% for single mothers with children. We have been and still have substandard and blighted properties in these neighborhoods. We have rehabilitated the homes that we could, even when others thought we were crazy, because these homes are the cultural fabric of these neighborhoods. Preserving and revitalizing these areas are extremely important to us. When we build new homes in these historic neighborhoods, we use designs that are appropriate. We build green infill housing on vacant lots or sites of demolished homes that truly can't be saved. And I see the slides that are showing what I just talked about. We were definitely considered crazy for saving those 2 houses. And this is one we demolished and built a new home. From the beginning, we committed to building homes to Earthcraft Standards, which is a regional certification program for energy efficient and healthy homes. This cost a little more, but the payoff for the families in savings in utilities and healthcare costs is huge. How could we not do this if we want families to be successful as homeowners? One new owner told us that she didn't think Georgia Power knew she was living in her home because her electricity bills were so low. Another family's trips to the emergency room for their son's asthma attack stopped after they moved into their new renovated home. Some of our homes are fully accessible, and all of our new homes are universal design so that people can age in place and people with disabilities can visit. We began homebuyer education classes and housing counseling because most of our homebuyers are the first in their families to own a home. Access to good credit was denied through institutional racism for so long that many people don't believe they can own a home. Long-term and well-deserved distrust of banks means that often people don't have a checking account, and some don't even have credit scores because they pay all their bills in cash. While our goal was to help people attain home ownership, we were aware that not everyone can own a home. Affordable rental housing that was safe and decent was out of reach for people with minimum wage jobs. Our state lottery that gives free tuition to students based on merit has created a market in our town for luxury student housing. When the land under a large mobile home park was sold in 2001, the residents had no place to go. Our public housing authority has a waiting list of several hundred people in at least 2 years. We partnered to build a mixed-income rental community with low-income housing tax credits. 4th Street Village is 120 units with 96 units reserved for people making less than 50% of area median income, or $25,000 for a family of 3. Also during the 1990s, Georgia was ranked 3rd in loss of farmland to development, even though agriculture is considered to be Georgia's biggest industry. Unlike Vermont, Georgians voted down a constitutional amendment to use a real estate transfer tax to fund green space acquisition because the realtors came out against it. Alt has become a leader in USDA's Farm and Ranch Land Protection Program with the preservation of 7 family farms and 2 more in process. This is a drop in the bucket. There are many more farmers who want to participate, but no match is available. In our county, Alt initiated a program to use a portion of our county's special local option sales tax to create a green infrastructure. In addition to providing match for farmland protection and buying urban green space, there are now 600 contiguous acres of protected land along the middle Oconee River. For several years, we have been doing outreach to underserved, largely African American farmers. During the 1900s, the number of black farmers in Georgia decreased by 51%. There were many reasons for this, but a big factor was discrimination. In the South, the average gross income and total acres of black farmers is half that of white farmers. We are working hard to help black farmers to be successful and to qualify for USDA programs that are offered. Many don't have a computer, keep extensive records, or have matching funds for the project. We also have a program to match new and beginning farmers to land so they can begin farming without the upfront capital expense. For over 10 years, Alt assisted with the community garden, and we saw the transformative power of this garden to bring a neighborhood together after a history of drug dealing and crime. We also saw community gardens as a bridge between our land conservation and our social justice and revitalization programs. Shortly after the 2000 census, our community was shocked to learn that we have one of the highest poverty rates in the country, at 36.7%, which is twice the rate of Georgia. In an effort to address food insecurity that goes along with poverty, our community Alt worked with a coalition of groups to connect a network of community gardens in senior residential communities, homeless shelters, affordable housing developments, churches, and schools. I love the expression by Ron Finley that growing your own food is like printing your own money. Part of our project was an economic development piece where people could sell any additional food that they grew for additional income. There was an abandoned African-American elementary school right on the main street in the neighborhood where we have been doing affordable housing for many years, and where there are 2 large public housing communities. The school district allowed us to put a garden on the playground. You can see the before and after pictures in the slides. We learned that in 1904, the principal of this school started garden plots for underprivileged children to grow food for their families. This was so successful that he started evening classes in cooking and nutrition and agriculture. So our garden is continuing this rich tradition of empowerment, and people from the neighborhood now work there and grow food for themselves. We started a produce stand the first year that the garden was open, and the next year, in 2013, we opened a farmer's market in the courtyard of the abandoned school, where we continue to double EBT dollars. We have more than 25 vendors, many of whom are low income or new and beginning farmers. We provide business development classes, cottage industry training, and one-on-one coaching for these courageous entrepreneurs. Since nutrition education is critical for people to make healthier choices, our markets always have cooking demonstrations and food tastings. Our school district has 82% of children receiving free and reduced lunch, and while Georgia is the 6th largest producer of vegetables in the U.S., we rank 2nd in childhood obesity. We know that children who are involved in growing vegetables are more likely to eat them, and our Farm to School program is increasing opportunities for children to garden and eat locally grown food. Our community agriculture program is working in many areas to develop an equitable local food system. In 2013, we started the Young Urban Farmer program, which provides at-risk high school students the opportunity to learn about organic farming, entrepreneurship, and life skills. One of the graduates of the program is now an apprentice at our 5-acre urban farm, as you can see on the slide, or you could just now, which is located very close to downtown and near our rental community in the other African-American neighborhood across town. Our plan for the Williams Farm is to be an educational center, job creator, and demonstration site for sustainable agriculture. The farm is adjacent to the 5-acre woods, which is a county park where we hold a conservation easement. We also own land across the street where we plan to build affordable housing. We're very excited about bringing together our 3 major programs in one area to show how these different land uses can complement each other. Where do we go from here to address the major issues of climate change, poverty, hunger, and lack of drinking water? George's Ray Anderson, CEO of Interface Carpet, who when challenged by his fellow businessmen for being concerned about the impact of his business on the environment, is famed for his retort, well, what's the business case for ending life on Earth? Andrew Winston, author of Gold to Green and The Big Pivot, suggests how we need to shift in order to save the planet. These are all familiar to you, and I see them discussed in the workshops today. Here are a few of my favorites. Look long term. Who can model that better than Land Trust with perpetual protection and 99-year renewable ground leases? 2, set science-based goals on what needs to happen to address climate change and protect our drinking water and natural resources. 3, mimic nature. We can look at nature's best practices and for excellent models of resilience. 4, become a lobbyist and educate our policymakers. We could eradicate hunger in this country with different policies. 5, pursue heretical innovation. In these challenging times, we are looking for ways to go even farther so we can contribute to regeneration. For example, building affordable housing that is not only net zero, but that contributes energy to the grid, and managing farms so that they suck massive amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere while also producing healthy food. And finally, one of my favorites, collaborate radically. The problems are so big that maybe we can only work on a piece at a time or in a small area, but we can partner to make sure that all aspects are being addressed. You're bringing together the realtors, developers, farmers, and environmentalists to develop a conspiracy of goodwill is a shining example. Henry Ford's quote describes VHCD very well. Coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success. Before my husband died in 2010, and someone I met for the first time asked me, "What do you do?" And I would be thinking about my elevator speech, which version I was going to use. My husband would say, "Saving the world." I was always embarrassed by this. It was grandiose, for I'm working in a small area in a conservative state, and I tend to see how much still needs to be done rather than what has been accomplished. But I've decided to own that I am part of a movement, along with you, to keep the world livable, and the actions we are doing are empowering people and moving toward a more just and healthy world for everyone. When I see middle schoolers growing and then eating fresh kale, or sit across the closing table from Gloria, a 68-year-old African-American custodian at UGA, buying a home that she never thought she could afford. Or see Miss Ethel, a former cook at UGA, selling her own food at the West Broad Market. Or observe the young urban farmers proudly harvesting their produce or selling the birdhouses they've made. or watch young Boys and Girls Club participant eat a cucumber for the first time, or help Dale Wiley protect the farm he grew up on, I begin to feel we are making a difference. Yes, there's a long way to go, but the programs of each of you are addressing the major issues we face in society today through your work with empowerment and sustenance. And your collaboration provides a synergy that even increases the impact. Thank you for what you are doing as an example, and for the many ways you're helping to save the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for sharing all of that with us, and I think inspiring all of us. We're going to move on to the plenary session. Nancy's going to be with us through the day. We're not going to do questions because we've gotten off to such a late start, but she'll be around through the day and at the film. So why don't we get our plenary panelists up here.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm Mark Johnson. I work at Vermont Digger now, and I will be your moderator this morning. Just let me give you a brief idea of what we're going to do here. We have 3 great panelists who are going to address the issue now of building equity and resilience in Vermont communities. They're each going to talk for 5 to 7 minutes. I'll have, or perhaps not, I'll have a couple of questions, and then what we're really looking forward to is getting some questions from you folks as well, too. So hopefully we'll leave enough time for that. Let's begin and welcome this morning Connie Snow. Connie is the founder and executive director of the Brattleboro Area Community Land Trust, and her work over the last 19 years has included rehabilitating Brattleboro's Lower Canal Street and also the Wilder Building, developing housing options in the downtown and villages, and collaborating with human service organizations on service-enriched housing for special need residents. Connie?
Good morning. Is that working? Okay. I think you'll actually hear a few of the familiar themes from Nancy's talk in my comments. The Housing Trust got started in the late 1980s. It was during a period of a tremendous escalation of housing prices and a period when absentee landlords were not investing in their properties, and the deterioration of rental housing in Brattleboro and other communities was really pronounced. We had a lot of housing in Brattleboro that was affordable by virtue of its dilapidated condition, and even that was disappearing. We started work improving housing condition, targeting some of the worst neighborhoods for the acquisition and renovation of rental housing. That was the vast majority of what we did for the next 15 or more years before we tried our hand at building some new housing in response to the need for more supply. We were asked on the panel to share a little bit about lessons learned and opportunities we see going forward, and I'm going to try to weave the two together in my comments. I came into this work looking at it through the lens of social justice. We have a market that doesn't serve the needs of so many Vermonters, and we set out to try to level the playing field to the degree possible. I remember hearing the former NPR commentator Juan Williams speak. It could have been here. It was in Burlington. He grew up in subsidized housing, and he described affordable housing work as the next civil rights struggle about inclusion, opportunity, and who lives next to whom in America. The partnership of housing and conservation got us thinking about how we did this work, about smart growth, preserving our downtowns and historic buildings, creating livable communities that included open space, working farms, and housing opportunity. And now, increasingly, we find ourselves looking at this work through the lens of the health of community members and our communities. We've known the connections between health and housing for many years, that unsafe housing exposes renters and homeowners alike to toxins, puts them at a higher risk of illness and injuries, and we've worked to make our housing safe and healthy. Many of you have seen the studies. One demonstrated that children without subsidized housing were 5 times more likely to have low growth indicators from poor nutrition, that terrible choice between eating and paying the rent. More recent studies show that your life expectancy can be predicted by your zip code. I'm sure you've seen those articles. We just completed a housing needs assessment of the 2 counties where we work, and the assessment showed in the last 5 years an accelerated split between wealthier and poorer residents. The poorest cohort of renters, those earning 30% of area median income or less, are growing the fastest. Over the last 15 years, this group of poorest renters has grown anywhere from 35% to 180% in various communities in our region. This comes at a time when the vacancy rate in Vermont is 1% for rental housing and even lower for subsidized housing. And it comes at a time when we have less resources to do our work. So where does this lead us, particularly in the current economic environment? We'll continue to advocate for resources, continue to advocate for the government to play its role in ensuring the well-being of its citizens. At the same time, there may be areas where instead of doing more, we can do it better. There's a lot of talk now about place-based approaches to community health and individual well-being. Well, I think we're all about place in our work. We have the success of the SASH model to inform us, and the SASH experts are actually in the audience, not right up here. But for those of you not familiar with it, SASH stands for Support and Services at Home, which links medical communities and affordable housing communities across the state, so that disabled and elderly Vermonters have the support they need to age at home. Collectively, we have a huge presence in neighborhoods across Vermont, and I think there's a lot of potential to use a SASH-like model to bring a variety of programming support, not only for the elderly, but for very low income and formerly homeless populations as well. I think one of the beauties of SASH is that it's a centrally planned program implemented locally. So we get some scale, which that's as close to scale as we may get in Vermont, but that's great. I have to say at the Housing Trust, I think we drifted away a bit from our partnerships with local service providers in the last 6 or 8 years, and now demographic changes are leading us back. It takes a lot to make these partnerships work. Your partners will evolve and change, and you continually need to invest in the relationships. I personally believe we need to commit to these local partnerships, integrate best practices into this effort, get clear on our roles and responsibilities. With our partners, we can pair affordable housing with vital support in areas ranging from substance abuse to parenting, nutrition, skills training, or mental health support. This support can be provided in scattered apartments as well as new models of permanent supportive housing where the support is provided on site. I also think there's more we can do to collaborate across the sectors for better outcomes for our communities, whether it be healthcare sector, agriculture or food access, economic development, education, law enforcement, transportation planning, or others. We're all stretched thin, and so often in our work, we work in parallel but separate tracks. Each sector has its own language, and it can feel like an obstacle to understand that. Here again, SASH demonstrates some of the power of merging the tracks. In the design of our housing developments, we're literally laying the foundations for health. The downtown neighborhood and village locations, the sidewalks that enhance walkability and accessibility, the green spaces, patio and common areas, safe play areas and central mailboxes, all of which enhance interaction and promote community. These neighborhoods that promote connection and healthy behaviors will promote overall health and well-being. Fully integrated services across the sectors could provide the ingredients for so many of our community members to thrive.
Next, we're going to hear from Catherine Sims. Catherine is the Executive Director of the Green Mountain Farm to School program. It's fascinating how many of those same issues down in Georgia are similar to what we have here. This program is an effort to try to improve child nutrition and support Vermont farms by connecting schools and farms through food and education. The program is based in Newport, and the Green Mountain Farm to School program also strengthens local food systems by promoting positive economic and educational relationships between schools, farms, and the communities. Catherine went to Yale University, where she worked with students to develop the Yale Farm and establish school gardens at local elementary schools. Catherine?
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. So I'm excited to talk about food. We all know that the local food system here in Vermont is vibrant. Yet, while the food system is bringing benefits to many Vermonters, some are being left behind, like the 13% of Vermonters that live in poverty, or the 1 in 5 children who experience hunger or food insecurity. So there's significant work that we need to do here in Vermont, especially in limited resource communities like the Northeast Kingdom, where our organization works, to ensure that all Vermonters benefit from access to healthy, affordable local food. So Vermont institutions who purchase food in bulk, like schools and prisons and hospitals, can offer consistent, guaranteed purchases for which farmers can plan and grow for. And also those large institutions serve tremendous numbers of Vermonters every single day. And so that's why increasing consumption of local food through institutions has been an early entry point for a lot of food systems organizations like my own. And Vermont has a lot of exciting, innovative solutions that are happening around institutional food, whether that's the Healthcare Without Harm pledge by hospitals, or the Vermont First initiative by Sodexo, or our growing farm to school movement here in Vermont. I wanted to share a little bit about one example from our work, our food hub, Green Mountain Farm Direct. So when I got into this work, I wanted to change the food system overnight. And I thought about, well, if we can buy food from local farms and serve it to kids, that's a way of supporting our farm economy and bringing good, healthy food to kids throughout Vermont. And so I said, well, I'll make a list of all the farms in my area, and I will deliver them to the food service staff at my local school, and my job will be done. Check that problem off the list. But as I'm sure many of you know, the food system is a little bit more complex than that, and that solution didn't appropriately address the barriers in the food system. So I said, okay, well, I'll order the food for the food service director the first time, and when it arrives and it's delicious and healthy, the food service will add it to the menu and then continue ordering on her own. And so I ordered the apples, they arrived, the kids loved them, they were delicious, the quality was great, but after that case was done, the food service went back to ordering it from the regular vendors because it was too difficult to switch to new vendors. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this once a month. I'm going to get all the local food products, put them together into a list, reach out to the buyers, take the orders, and get the farmers to deliver it. The food service liked that solution, but the farmers were not excited about delivering 1 quart of yogurt down 10 miles of dirt road to the school. So I said, okay, fine, I'll get it in my Subaru. And so I started driving around to all those farms and picking up the food. And that was working, except once a month wasn't frequent enough to really affect behavior changes with the food service staff that I was working on. So we started a weekly ordering system where we reached out to all the farms, got their products, made a list, took orders, and then pretty soon we were doing steady enough business that we could contract with a local distributor to pick up that product and deliver it. And so we've grown steadily in this last year. We worked with 90 different institutional customers, purchased food from 40 different farmers, and collectively got $350,000 worth of local food into our schools, prisons, and hospitals. And so I share this example for 2 reasons. One, it would not have been possible without VHCP. That many of the farms that we work with are farming on conserved land, which has made that land affordable and accessible to new and growing farmers. Many of those farms have participated in the Farm and Forest Viability Program, which provided technical assistance to help those growers scale up to be ready to serve the wholesale market. And even our organization, Green Mountain Farm to School, has benefited significantly from a number of consultants who've helped us define and refine our business model with VHCP funding. And I also bring it up because I think it exemplifies a lot of what I've learned over the last several years of doing this work, that while the food system is complex, relentless trial and error and evaluation is necessary to get to a solution that sticks. That we've learned that Vermonters do want to purchase local food, and that often there are gaps, like in this case an information gap, what did farmers have, and an infrastructure gap, how to get that food to the customers, that by creating a solution that addressed those gaps, we were able to now consistently and regularly bring local food to institutions across northern Vermont. But institutions are just a small piece of the food system, and if we want to reach every Vermonter, we need to do more. And I think affordable housing sites present a great opportunity to expand our food system to reach more Vermonters. So as you all know, there is a close connection between housing security and food security. Both are a basic need that families need to account for. And at times, the two priorities can be competing, especially for families that are living on a tight budget. And so affordable housing is critical, that when families are no longer burdened or overburdened by housing expenses, they have more income available to spend on food. And our affordable housing sites can do additional work to help address barriers around food access, like addressing transportation issues and nutrition education so that families have the knowledge and skills that they need to prepare healthy, affordable food. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration between affordable housing providers and food access organizations. There are definitely a number of examples, although I would say some unique examples that are already happening in Vermont, whether that's Food Connects' neighborhood market in Brattleboro, where they have a farmer's market at a local school that has a tiered buying model where the full price share helps subsidize farm shares for low-income Vermonters, or whether it's Rural Edge subsidizing coupons for residents to purchase meals at Green Mountain Farm to School's lunchbox food truck that serves healthy local food all summer up in the Northeast Kingdom. Or whether it's the Highgate Apartments in Barrie, where they have a communal teaching garden plot as well as individual garden beds for residents that are combined with classes from Good Food is Good Medicine, so that residents are able to grow their own food. Or whether it's the Learning Kitchen by Hunger Free Vermont, where they offer 6 weeks of foundational skill training and classes about cooking on a budget, where in many cases participants leave with a grocery bag so that they can replicate that meal at home. So there are a lot of exciting, innovative things happening around food access and housing here in Vermont, but we need to do more, so much more. We need food systems organizations to bring the programming that they're already offering into our housing sites. And we need housing sites to reach out and ask for support and identify ways that they can do more around food at the housing sites that we already have here in Vermont. Food security matters. What we feed our kids and what we teach them about that food affects how they will grow, how they will learn, what they will feed their own families, and how long they will live. We know that Vermonters value fresh, healthy local food, and that they would buy more of it, but often there are barriers that stand in the way. And so I implore all of us to think about what we can do to identify those barriers and to come up with new strategies for integrating food into our work every single day. I know that us all working together around the nexus or the intersection between housing and food and agriculture, we can ensure that every single Vermonter has access to healthy, affordable local food. Thank you.
David Marvin is our next speaker. David is a board member of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. He's also a sugar maker and forester. He's the founder of Butternut Mountain Farm, a family enterprise that's focused on production, processing, and marketing maple products for its own farm and hundreds of others. David.
Good morning, everyone. I began Butternut Mountain Farm in I began Butternut Mountain Farm in 1972 with a vision of a Vermont family business that would combine a livelihood and a life on land and with people we know and love. I didn't have a family then or a business then. It was a little brash perhaps, but I'm fortunate now and grateful that I have a family that shares this vision and works with me. Well, that vision is personal, not something we usually talk about publicly. I wanted to share it today because I imagine it's very similar to the vision that many others have as they work the land and participate in Vermont community life. I could have sought to bring that vision to fruition in a number of ways, but as a child I worked on a dairy farm, so I knew it wasn't going to be with animals or cows. I knew maple syrup making was something that I knew and loved, and so I set out to do that. And it was kind of crazy 43 years ago to think that there was a full-time living in it. But today we have a business driven by our mission to be a profitable, diversified, value-added maple syrup supplier. And we seek to accomplish that mission by earning respect from our customers, our suppliers, our employees for safe quality products and for providing excellent, extraordinary service, a genuine commitment to the maple industry, and excellent stewardship of our woodlands. We want to do that while acting with integrity and respect for the communities that sustain us. And we define those communities not just as human, but those of all biota. I think our mission aligns well with the theme of this conference today. On our farm, we have over 20,000 taps, and we've managed our woodlands for years, not just to leave them undiminished by our use, but hopefully improved from the abused condition in which we've received them. We have about 100 employees now, most working at our processing plant in Morrisville, processing, selling, and distributing maple syrup all over the country. Most of it, all of it, from over 400 farms. Many of them are conserved by the HCD and its partners. Most of our revenue is generated out of state, but for the last year I have good numbers. In 2013, over 90% of our expenditures were made in Vermont. And I think that's one of the real beauties of or economic beauties of agriculture. That is that with hard work and deploying capital in the right places, we can create value and keep it working in our communities. When we were building and growing our farm, our processing business, lack of affordable capital was a major constraint, as it is for so many others I know. We were land poor, and to grow and expand and diversify, we needed to sell some of our farm or leverage the equity that we were building in it. That first choice seemed untenable, and the second was really economically unwise. So in 1995, we were very fortunate, and we were able to sell the development rights to our place. We invested those funds in a new warehouse at the Morrisville facility and in efforts to grow our markets. Unlocking that capital that was tied up in the right to develop, which was a right we never wanted to exercise, was really a huge boost to help our business grow. What I really need to emphasize, though, is that focusing on the economics of conservation really can diminish the impacts and importance of the work. From our family's perspective, conserving our farm was really liberating. It completely removes the, what if it was developed conversations that almost all families have to have. Conservation focuses the land relationship on stewardship, and I think that's a far higher aspiration than ownership. Conservation also provides comfort, knowing that the work and investment to be good stewards won't be destroyed or corrupted by ignorance or greed. Conservation really matters, and it's a reward in itself. I know all of you don't need to be told why conservation matters, but I think much of the public really does. If we're going to have meaningful measures to address environmental issues like water quality on working lands, they'll come from true stewards who are all in for the long haul. If we care about a working landscape that supports our fellow Vermonters, conservation matters. If we love bird watching or hunting or fishing or outdoor recreation, scenic beauty, our cultural and historic resources, it matters to care for the land in our place. If you want a vibrant tourist economy in Vermont, conservation matters. If you care about maple trees and healthy forests and unfragmented forests, conservation matters. And if you need, like I do, time alone with space apart outdoors, conservation matters. And if you want your children and your grandchildren and theirs to enjoy the natural and the productive landscape we all enjoy. Conservation matters. Each of us, each of you, can add to this, let me know. An old friend of mine who's worked with me for over 40 years keeps reminding me that without us, the earth would be just fine. And he's right. And I believe as long as we want to be part of it, conservation is something that matters. It can, however, and it won't, and it shouldn't occur in a vacuum. We must inculcate in society, and especially in the owners of conserved land, not just a stewardship ethic, but a true conservation ethic. Without that, when all the conservation work is done, and we've saved the land, what we'll be left with is the role of policing and enforcing our easements, rather than monitoring their behavior. And I don't think any of us would cherish that role. Furthermore, I believe if we don't become a society that embodies equity and social justice, then conservation will be in peril. If one is hungry, homeless, lacking in fundamental sustenance, it's just really difficult to focus on the long-term benefits of conservation. And conversely, if one's focus is on whatever pays the maximum profits, despite the impacts of that attitude, then conservation can be seen simply as an impediment to success. I think we can confront these challenges. I'm an optimist, and otherwise I wouldn't be a sugar maker. The work of VHCB and its partners gives me hope. Many in conservation I know are focused on people as well as the land, building understanding and love of place. And I believe that the closer people and businesses and communities are to the land, the better it is for economic and social well-being. While the work of the housing and human service providers I've come to know through VHCB also gives me great hope. Getting people decent, affordable housing, supportive services at home, and access to healthy local food is simply fundamental for people to focus outside of themselves. I know certainly addressing homelessness and poverty and injustice, let alone greed and selfishness, it'll take more hands and more minds and more spirit and more time than all of us in this room. But each of us, whatever each of us can do to foster decent relations among humankind, that'll be our best hope for fostering better relations between us and the other communities with which we share this earth, and indeed with the earth itself. So I appreciate this morning the opportunity to express my gratitude to all of you for what you do. Thank you.
Very much like to get to some questions from you folks. So I'm going to limit myself here to actually one. And I'd like the three of you to address this. And David was just talking about this. Nobody in this room needs to be convinced about the need for housing and conservation. But what more can you do to get the public to support you? And when you talk about that, can you talk a little bit about, beside money, what your biggest challenge is? And Catherine, maybe you could start us.
So how do we proselytize beyond our, I think the question here, how do we bring more people into the fold about caring about food and housing and conservation? I think, I guess I'd like to say, I think the three most important things that we do in our lives, we do every day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it's sort of a joke, but it's not. Like, rarely do we get to make choices that affect our own health, the health of our community, and the health of the environment. We do that every time we choose to put on our plate. And so I think, in that I'm trying to find a way to connect, food is we all eat, so we're all connected to it. But how do we tell our story in a way that connects to every individual Vermonter so that they can see their own benefits today and into the future for the work that we're doing? So what are the stories, what are the examples, or what are the ways that our work can impact an individual and bring them into this world? I mean, we are trying hard at our work to really expand beyond just schools, and that was sort of the low-hanging fruit where we started our work, but increasingly, we are focused, as I said, on trying to expand our work to housing sites and also to retail grocery stores where we know that the majority of Vermonters buy their food. And so the more we can bring our work to where people are, I think the more buy-in and support we can get for transforming our community.
about that challenge. What's the biggest challenge besides more money for you in your organization?
I think it's the awareness and the buy-in that like we are all so busy and we all have so many competing priorities in the world, and one person, one individual, one organization can't change the world, but we all needed to do it together, and we are better together, but we inspire people to join our effort, and I think it's hard to break through all the chatter or the emails or the text messages that help people focus on what sometimes are long-term needs, but so important for us today.
Connie, how would you answer that?
Well, I think the joining of housing and conservation and the evolution, everything else that has been captured, it's been climate change and health. It's been such a big vision, and I think that's it may make it sometimes hard to tell the story, but it also makes it pretty powerful vision. So I'm forgetting your original question, but I think that's my answer. Beyond money, I mean, everything sort of ties back to money or sometimes, but I think getting the collaborations right, because I don't think we can address these really multiple issues we're facing in our communities without these collaborations, and they're a lot of work and they take ongoing effort, and so that's difficult.
Okay. David, maybe you can talk about my question about getting public buy-in and the challenges more in your work on the board, as opposed to on your particular farm, which sounds like it's doing just right.
I don't know if I can talk about it on the board, but I think we need, in our communities, to talk about the nexus of all of the issues that we've heard about earlier this morning, especially. There isn't a disconnect between conservation and housing and food and education and healthcare. They all relate. And all the things that are fundamental, elemental to life, we need to be reminded of that. And the work of supporting housing and people in the right places is critically important. So is having healthy food and working for us. So I think in Vermont we're lucky. We have communities that where we can overlap with so many kinds of work, and we just need to keep talking about the fact that our one little avenue, not avenue, but area of work is not, it connects to everybody else. We need to remember that. That's what community is all about.
Looking for some questions from you folks out here. Sarah?
Well, Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot, even though I know you're a moderator. What do you think we should do politically to get our message across?
Do we get to go to a commercial break now? I think events like this are important. I think the more you can get together, one of the areas that's confusing for me is how conservation and housing go together. And I'm sure that some of you standing here in the room say, how can anybody not see the connection? But it really is two different things, and I was very interested to hear the group here talk about the difficulty of sometimes you're working in your silo and you're not really aware of what the other person's doing, and how, if you guys aren't clear what the other person's doing, I think it's difficult for the public. I think events like this are critical. You're very fortunate you've got Gus Seelig. I mean, God knows what sort of money you'd be getting otherwise. Because as you know, I mean, every year, this is one of the I'm not just blowing his horn, because the truth is, when it gets down to the end of the legislative session, this is one of these items that's right on the bubble. It's very easy to say, well, it's 14 or 12. Now to you guys, that's devastating. To the public, it's almost a rounding error. So those are just my guess. Anybody a question for the panel? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Bridgewater. I work for the Windsor Housing Trust. And Captain, I was very inspired by your message of the connection with food and housing. And I can't remember if it was you or earlier that said growing your own food is like printing your own money. And I'm really intrigued by how to connect these two fields. And you obviously have a lot of passion. That's one of your central messages this morning. So have you begun that work of expanding beyond schools? And can you talk about some of those early conversations and what you think is working and how we can begin that conversation and get some traction?
Yeah, thanks. I think there are, as I mentioned, some initial exciting successes around food and housing, but I really think that there's a lot more to be done, and I think a lot of it has to do with what Mark was just talking about, sort of different silos and different worlds, and again, I think this event is a good example of trying to bring together and to bridge some of the gaps between the housing and the food world, and I think the HCP is making great strides. They had a Emerson fellow sort of trying to tease apart some of the issues or the opportunities to bring housing and food together this last year, and published a great report that's on our website, which has some of the case studies that I referenced. I think I wish I had a silver bullet about. I know that I think we need to better understand who the people are in the different roles and trying to bring those leaders together to really say, what are you doing? I feel very strongly that a number of food systems organizations are delivering programming at other sites, whether it's schools or hospitals or prisons, that could easily be replicated at housing sites, but we haven't found the funding or built the connections to make that possible. And I think that's the housing world reaching out and saying, I have a site, it has X number of people who would be interested in cooking classes or gardening, or reaching out to the transportation organization to get people to farmers markets where they can use their EBT or SNAP dollars. Really identifying what those low-hanging fruits are so that we can find the right partner organizations to bring to the table.
So it was mentioned that having been around for a long time, I want to say something that's perhaps is not going to be particularly comfortable, but it's been bothering me for 35 years. I was around when the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board was created. At the time, I was counsel of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and I had a somewhat myopic view of our role at that time in terms of government housing. In order to make housing, you have to keep the unit cost down. And if you're going to keep the unit cost down, then land has to grow to really expensive. So I recall a conversation with Steve Kimball, who was a very good lobbyist, who successfully, of course with the help of many others, drove through the creation of Vermont Housing and Conservation. Steve, what the hell does conserving land have to do with building more housing for people? Isn't it an inherent contradiction? To which Steve gave me a very wise answer. Well, first, that's not my problem. And in the long run, we'll work it out. Now, respectfully, very respectfully, I see that the faith, I'm a little more negative by nature, the faith that folks have had in doing things piecemeal has been, really to a considerable extent, rewarded. So I am constantly surprised. I go to the new North End, the old North End, where my office is very close, and I see something pop up that looks really good and fits in, and I know as housing people where there was a dump before, and I say, I think I probably know the people who were responsible for that. And there's a dot here, and a dot there, and a dot there, but I am still struck by the inherent, if not contradiction, tension. I don't think a 1% vacancy rate is entirely independent or entirely surprising when we devote so much effort to the conservation of land. I'm not being an advocate for the application that people leave. I'm just presenting the issue for any comment that anybody wants to make about how you resolve
The conflict of interest.
that conflict.
Okay, great. David, could you start us on that?
Well, I mean, my major premise is that if we don't have people having those things that are fundamental to living, like good housing, good food, and decent health care, and hopefully good education, then we're not going to have support for conservation. So from my perspective as a conservationist, I think social justice and social equity are really, really important. I mean, I think there's also a very good argument to be made that just from a practical perspective, that if we put housing where it belongs, and we have agriculture in spaces where it belongs, there's no conflict whatsoever. There's plenty of space to do what we need to do to feed and clothe and shelter people, we need, but if you love the land, you want to make sure that those things happen in the right place. So I think the dual mission makes incredibly good sense.
Yes.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Eileen Peltier from Downstreet Housing and Community Development. I think going back to Connie's first comment and the roots of VHCP, the issue is not about enough housing or enough food or enough conservation of land. It's about social justice, and I think now we add environmental justice to that. So if that's our goal, the rest of it makes sense. If we go micro 2 level and say it's about units or it's about a certain amount of conservation of land, we miss the whole point. So I think going back to the roots of what VHCP was all about, and what most of us sitting around the room are all about. I'm a housing person, but I'm really about social justice and environmental justice. And I think when we're trying to have those partnerships and conversations with each other, that's what we have to remember. We have to look at it, don't look at me as a housing person. Look at me as the person who cares about the same things you care about. And that's how those partnerships and conversations happen.
Okay.
Over here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is perhaps a follow-up question to your comment. I'm Rick DeAngelis, and I work at VHCP. I'm the director of the conference. Connie, I'm observing that over the years that housing organizations have become larger and larger and larger, and they are not so much locally based now, they're more regionally active and based. And my question to you, do you think that there is a risk that we're becoming disconnected from the grassroots, from community concerns, from a democratic character of our organizations? And if that's a concern, what can we do about it? What are you trying to do about it?
Okay, well, I mean, we had to think a lot about this before we merged 4 years ago with Rockingham Area Community Land Trust. And actually, I remember, I don't know if Brenda Torby's in the room, but I talked to her because they had had their merger, and I remember her saying that small isn't necessarily beautiful. What we need to, she said, what we need to be is strong for our residents. We have to ensure that we're strong. And so it's not easy being more regional, covering, I mean, I think when I figured out that Windsor County went all the way up to Bethel, I was sort of, it was a little hard to imagine, so it's a lot of work, but I think it's doable. The more, you know, Wendy on my staff and a bunch of us go around, Elizabeth, we go around, and we're getting to know these communities, and you sort of get down to the nitty-gritty pretty quickly with so it takes time and it takes effort, but I think it works. That's my perspective.
There's a question over here. Gay.
I love, in answering Mark's first question, Connie and Dave answered in ways that I probably would have, and they have from the same color hair, and talked about, you know, big concepts that in a place like this we do need to chew over: climate justice, environmental justice, connections. And Catherine, you spoke about, we need to talk about breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's, I think, to me, the challenge is how do we mull over and come to terms with these big issues that basically make people want to either go to sleep or hide under their bed. And in reaching beyond this community, talk about ways that talk about as our daily experience as Vermonters. And I think I'm curious, and I attribute some of that difference to the fact that I think of you as an emerging leader as opposed to someone who's been in leadership for a while. And I'm curious what you experience and maybe what Connie and Dave see as ways of bringing new leadership to these critical organizations? What are the barriers to 30-somethings and 40-somethings taking the reins in this movement? And because I think that that is a piece of this puzzle, talking beyond this room.
Thanks, Kate. Interesting observations. I think we all live in a increasingly busy world where we're drawn in a lot of different directions. I know that for our organization, we struggled thinking about how to attract young leadership to our board. I have a lot of great leaders on our board who, many are retired and are able to set aside, half day, full day, afternoons for our board meetings, but attracting sort of, 30-year-olds with young kids to engage at the board level with our organization and provide that leadership to help us move forward in the next generation is a struggle. And I think we're trying to rethink what is our board leadership model? How do we convene? Is it shorter, more tech-based ways of gathering together? Do I have different expectations about how many meetings and how many hours my board members are putting in? And I think similarly we have to think about our organizations in that way. How do we adapt to the changing world in different ways that we can connect that allow people to see themselves in it? And thinking about how to engage the community in our work more broadly, I see this sort of firsthand in Newport, where our offices were on Main Street, and about a quarter of Main Street has been demolished. If anyone has been up to Newport recently as a part of the EB5 project and the potential renovation of JP and Burke and the airport and downtown Newport, and we're part of a community that's really struggling. Like how do we move forward? How do we develop in a way that brings social and environmental justice to everyone in our community? And I think finding ways to make that personal and have everyone in the community see something for themselves and see how advancing housing and food access and healthcare for everyone in our community helps the rising tide lifts all boats, I think is not a dialogue that our community is used to. And I think we need new strategies to have that conversation collectively. I think that's the power of all of you here in this room is how do we reach out and talk about our work in new ways that bring new folks to the table in their busy lives. And I think it's about connecting it to every individual so they can see how their life will be better when everyone in our community has access to healthcare and education and housing and food.
Can I just ask, so how do you do that? How do you do that?
We are trying hard as an organization to be relevant on Twitter and Facebook and our website, and communicate not only through print mail but e-newsletters that think about how to speak to our community in a way that works for their schedule. The 7 o'clock city council meeting on Monday night doesn't necessarily work for everyone, and we're really excited to potentially work with the Land Trust on a project up in Newport, and it'll be an opportunity to explore how do you bring together diverse community members to have a conversation about what our future can look like in a way that's inclusive and positive. And I think, this is emergent. I guess learning from our lessons with Farm Direct, I think it's about trying a lot of things and seeing if it's not working and then trying it again and relentlessly working hard to find new ways to bring people together. I don't have any easy answers, but I think it's important for us all to think about inclusion in our messaging and new strategies to reach new millennials.
Anything the two of you would like to add to that?
I would just say I recognize how difficult that is. I think in business, for-profit or not-for-profit, we need to create space and time for people who work with us to be able to participate. Being self-employed, it was my choice to do that. And I think we need to let people have time to do that. I share an office with a 31 and 34-year-old, my son and daughter, and I really don't understand. I can't fathom how they do it. It's so much work to have 2 working spouses, and between them they have 5 children, full-time jobs and participate in the community, and it's really tough. And I agree with Catherine, just got to find new ways, and it's not the old way, I don't think. I also think, as I serve on a number of boards, I think organizations need to create space and new ways to take chances on board members who aren't the norm, who are younger or from different community parts of the community.
The way your kids are able to do it is that they have a grandparent. We have time for one or two more here. Yes, ma'am. Brenda.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Is small beautiful?
Well, some things would be beautiful if they were smaller. But I did want to address the question of, I'm sure to a lot of the public it looks like housing conservation, we get that, are in conflict, the built, the unbuilt. But when we started the HCB, our vision was not between built and unbuilt. Our vision was, and the conflict and the issue we are focused on from social justice is not that, but it's the difference, the conflict between people who view our land and our resources simply as opportunities to extract wealth and build profit, as opposed to those of us who see our community resource, our communities and our land as the resources that we should be enabling and supporting. That was the difference between land use. Is it just for people who want to come and take money out? It is the prevailing market way. I'm not disputing that. But in this state, people here today really believe that our communities, our land, and our resources should be for the benefit of everybody, and that we should be building stronger communities. And that is the real conflict. And yes, if that part of our market that insisted that some people can extract as much profit as possible, that's the best thing for our state. It would be great if that was a lot smaller.
Let's take one more. Liz?
I'm Liz Curry with Vermont Energy Investment Corporation. And my question for each of you, if we have time, is what's your vision for the next generation for the economy, and how what we're doing will really build that, the kind of economy that we want to see to be transformed? I think some of the questions Mark has been asking are kind of probing around, what's our role in the economy, and how do we connect with people? People leave the houses that we develop and the land that we can serve every day to go out to work. And the people we serve and the people we work with are, vastly either underemployed or employed in a vocation that's being defined by larger forces. And how do we seize that ground in Vermont to define the economy that we envision?
I think we have an exciting opportunity or a big challenge in front of us here in Vermont, especially for those who are paying attention to demographics and the shifting age of Vermonters and what that means both for long-term healthcare costs and ongoing educational costs. We all know that so many of us live here in Vermont because of the quality of life that we are able to access. And I think finding the way to continue to afford the quality of life that matters so much to us, even when we know that we're not reaching everyone in Vermont, is a real daunting task in front of us. But I think we need to continue to hold those values of social justice, environmental justice, and access for all in our minds as we move forward. And I think we need to find an economy that rewards and values what makes Vermont special, and it's not the extraction model. It's the investing in quality of life is what attracts people to want to be here, and figuring out how we look at the digital economy moving forward and how we create new models for how we work together to hopefully help sustain the future.
You know, we just did the housing needs assessment. I referred to the analyst said in the assessment that really the affordable housing need has to be viewed from the lens of the erosion of jobs and wages in our communities, and that we need to be a part of that conversation, the housing sector with the economic development sector. I know there's an effort in Windham County, Sevitz, to work on job creation and raising average wages, and we're trying to get into that conversation. I don't have any other answers beyond that. It's a big problem.
I hope we have I really like diversity, and I hope we have a very diverse economy that allows work, valuable work, worthy work, for people in any sector they want. So whether it's high tech or education or healthcare, but also working the land. And I would hate to see Vermont without a vibrant working landscape. And I hope that we can get to a place where people understand there's much worth and value in farming and in farmers as there is in someone with a high-powered business career, because we all need healthy food, and we need this landscape to maintain the fabric of the life that we value so much. And I would just say food's too cheap, so I hope the economy that we in the future recognizes that we need to pay for what we get, and so that those who work the land get financially rewarded as well as they can too. I can tell you, I mean, we need this because I have to speak for myself. We can't not all of us are meant to do office work or arithmetic. I can do arithmetic, I can't do any more math than that. And we have to have a variety of work and recognize that all work has value. And I think without it, people have to struggle.
I want to thank our panel.
Thanks, everybody. Larry's going to give you a couple logistics in a moment. I just want to take one crack at a piece of the question Mark asked, which is to point out the obvious. For the next 13 months, right now there are 5 people who want your vote to be the next governor. There is no better time than when people want your vote to talk to them and the public about what it is we do, why you value it, why it matters. So this is a great time to be involved in those conversations. We also have with us today our staff from our congressional delegation. I just wanted to recognize Kate Ash, Kevin Veller. If you haven't met her yet, she's back in our congressional office with Congressman Welch. She was with the Jeffords office quite a while ago, and Alex Craven from Senator Sanders' office are all here, and thank you for being here today. And they're here for you to talk to today, but what I'd say is when you hear about the federal budget and all the problems of it, don't call them. Call all your friends and neighbors who live out of state and tell them that our delegation needs help. Those are the folks who we've got to work on. They're doing great work, and thank you for being here. And Larry's going to give you the logistics, but once more, thanks to our plenary panel and Mark Johnson for joining us today.
I'm not an emerging leader. In case you were confused, I'm not following us. But I do have something to say to the emerging leaders. You all have a gold circle on your name tag. And we have a videographer here today who would like to do short interviews with you, say 5 minutes. And we'll find you throughout the day. I'm not going to identify the person because he's going to be doing 5 other things. But if you might just think about that, because we value the work you're doing and you'd like to do some videography with an interview with you. Logistical items. Workshops after this session, one me and one E are on this floor, right behind you. And the others are all upstairs in the second floor. One one floor up. And you have a map on the back of your conference agenda if you're visually able. Buses for the field trips will be outside, just outside the lobby, the big doors for all the field trips. And then at noon, when we have lunch, the Housing Conservation Coalition has a meeting, and you will be meeting upstairs in the mezzanine. Does anybody have anything else I'm supposed to say? Okay, thanks very much.